Welcome to Wrangling Wednesday, to Wednesday's edition of Glendale Baptist Devotional Podcast. I'm your host, Ron Plymel, and as a horse trainer, minister, and evangelist through Greener Grass Ministries and Horsemanship, it is my great privilege each Wednesday to lead you in a devotional thought. Today, our scripture comes from the book of Exodus, the last chapter, the last few verses, so that will be Exodus chapter 40, beginning in verse 34, and we will read through the remaining verses of the chapter. In verse 34, it tells that the cloud covered the tabernacle, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could no longer enter the tabernacle because the cloud had settled down over it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Now, whenever the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the people of Israel would set out on their journey following it. But if the cloud did not rise, they remained where they were until it lifted. The cloud of the Lord hovered over the tabernacle during the day, and at night fire glowed inside the cloud so that the whole family of Israel could see it. This continued throughout all their journeys. Are you familiar with the expression putting the cart before the horse? It's an expression that is used when a person gets things turned around, when they get messed up or out of order. And that's something we can do in all aspects of our lives, because naturally the cart belongs behind the horse and not before it. One of the biggest temptations that I encounter, not only in working with horses, but working with the ones who own or will eventually ride the horses, is to try and do too much too soon, to get things out of order, to put the cart before the horse. For instance, clients want to run with their horses before the horse gets a controllable stop on him. Or they want to do a one-rein stop at a trot or a lope before they get it accomplished at a walk. They want to go outside the round pen into a more open environment before they learn about keeping the horse under control in the confines of a round pen, etc. All of these scenarios, plus many more, are examples of how one can put the cart before the horse in regard to working with him or in regard to the training of him. It's also possible to get things in the wrong order, having the wrong priority in our lives, especially our spiritual life. The text I shared with you earlier came to have a different light shed on it for me this past week. This past week, I had the privilege to attend our state evangelism conference with a dear friend whom I'm also blessed to call my pastor, Brother John Hames. And at that conference, Dr. Steve Gaines used this particular passage to base his message upon. And to really understand the impact of these scriptures, it's significant to understand the context of them. The book of Exodus is a book about the Exodus, the exiting of the Israelites from Egypt. And all through the book, you find the Israelites all over the spectrum with their commitment. They're in and out, up and down, high and low, dedicated and frustrated. But here in the latter part of this book, the book of Exodus, they seem to have things worked out. They seem to have things right, the right perspective. It's no longer the selfish thought of why doesn't God, or why do we have to. It's no longer about what God is or should do for us, but what is it that we can do for God. It's about putting God and the things of God first. And when that happens, a remarkable thing takes place. God shows up. God blesses. His presence is experienced in a mighty way. Listen again to this passage as I share it with you once more, beginning in verse 34, and make special note of the number of times the cloud is emphasized, because the cloud, of course, is the presence of God. And when he is present, his glory can just fill the place. In verse 34, it tells us the cloud covered the tabernacle, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could no longer enter the tabernacle because the cloud had settled down over it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Now, whenever the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the people of Israel would set out on their journey following it. But if the cloud did not rise, they remained where they were until it lifted. The cloud of the Lord hovered over the tabernacle during the day, And at night fire glowed inside the cloud, so the whole family of Israel could see it. And this continued throughout all of their journeys. And from this, Dr. Gaines made several wonderful points. But the one that spoke to me really as a minister as well as a child of God was when he said something like, we focus so often on how we can get more people to come to our churches, when we should be focused on how we can get more of God to come to our church. And that hit me as a minister, because that has definitely been a concern of mine. How can I get more people? How can we get more people to participate in our ministry? How can we get more people to participate in our cowboy churches? So it seems a place where I may have put the cart before the horse. I also believe that what is so often said of the church, though, is also true for us as God's family, as His children. If we want to truly have an impact on more people to really better our world, then we need to look for ways to get more of God into our life, more of Him into our activities and our priorities. And let's not deceive ourselves into thinking that we don't really need more of Him, or perhaps need Him at all. It's easy in this world to think higher of ourselves than we really ought to, than we really should. And you may have heard the story about the renowned boxer Muhammad Ali. It said that he was once seated on a plane that was about to take off, and the stewardess was making her rounds. And she asked Ali to fasten his seatbelt, and when she came back around again, he still had not fastened his seatbelt, so she asked him again. She said, "Sir, would you please fasten your seatbelt?" And Ali looked up at her from his seat and said, "Ma'am, Superman don't need a seatbelt." She looked back down at him and said, "Superman don't need a plane to fly him where he needs to go either. So fasten your seatbelt." We need to have the proper perspective of ourselves. Don't let this world tempt you into thinking that you don't need God, or that we couldn't use more of God in our lives. Let's make sure we keep things in proper order. The horse in front of the cart, and God out in front of us. Until the Lord blesses us with meeting once again, may He greatly bless the trails you travel.
Each Wednesday, the Glendale Devotional Podcast is pleased to feature audio devotions from Greener Grass Ministry and Horsemanship. The speaker on today's broadcast was Brother Ron Plymel. To learn more about Greener Grass Ministry and Horsemanship, or to schedule them to come to your church, club, or function, please call Brother Ron Plymel at 662-415-1514. Or you can email him at greenergrassministry@gmail.com. You're always welcome to attend Cowboy Church, which is held on Sunday mornings at 8:30 at High on the Hog Barbecue, Highway 72 in Glenn, Mississippi. Or you can watch their services on Facebook anytime. Simply like the page Greener Grass Ministries and Horsemanship to receive updates about scheduling, services, and ministry opportunities.